This is a government cover-up.
After looking at these startling government cover-ups,
The government just sued me on the day this book hit the shelves.
you will have a hard time trusting the government anymore. From killing civilians to spying on citizens and trying to escalate wars, these were the things the government tried to cover up.
And I hold top secret government information.
And for some of these, they succeeded. From covert operations to frightening experiments, we'll unearth the disturbing realities that have been kept hidden from the public eye.
Oh no!
Prepare for a voyage through the shadows of power where deception prevails and the truth is elusive. Stay tuned as we peel away the layers of secrecy to discover the most shocking government cover-ups. Let's get to it.
Let's start.
Number 1, UFOs and Alien. For years, UFOs have piqued the interest of conspiracy theorists, but they are no longer mere conspiracies. An abundance of revelations, declassified records, and public stories indicate continuous government secrecy about extraterrestrial encounters. Did you know there's an alleged secret team known as Majestic 12? Tasked with examining and concealing evidence of alien contact, this isn't just a made-up term. Even FBI agents received memos about this team accompanied by highly classified documents. Add to this the compelling testimonies from government officials, military personnel, astronauts, and scientists, and you have got an argument that is not so easy to ignore. Many of these people claim to have directly encountered UFOs or participated in secretive programs aimed at investigating these phenomena, and dismissing it all as mere conspiracy becomes increasingly difficult. Take the Roswell incident, for instance, a cornerstone of UFO conspiracy theories. Initially, the Army announced they had recovered a flying disc, only to retract the statement later. 19 years afterwards, a retired officer stated that the speculated debris from the crash site was extraterrestrial. This cast doubt on the official explanation of a weather balloon, suggesting a potential cover-up. And this theory is even supported by former American Senator Harry Reid, who confirmed the government's long-standing secrecy regarding UFOs. But why the secrecy? The most benign explanation could be a desire to prevent public panic. However, a more widely accepted theory suggests a strategic motive. What's that? Well, just harnessing alien technology for military supremacy. Somehow, I don't doubt the government would try to do that. Number 2, Edward Snowden leaks. So about the FBI keeping tabs on us like we're characters in a reality show, they can't stop binge-watching. Yeah, that joke's been around for some time. We all had a laugh, especially with the government always playing it cool, denying everything. Well, there is some pretty serious evidence to back up this joke. In 2013, Edward Snowden blew the lid off the government cover-up by leaking some highly classified documents. The leaked documents were about how the National Security Agency NSA had been spying on pretty much everyone. We're talking phone calls, internet history, and other shady stuff, and by the way, that is without any warrant or oversight. Among the bombshells was this thing called PRISM, a surveillance program that let the NSA peek into the data from big tech names: Google, Facebook, Microsoft, you name it. This whole saga got people heated, sparking a massive debate on what's legal, what's right, and how much of our personal space we're willing to give up for the sake of security. Snowden, meanwhile, went from being another IT guy to a full-blown whistleblower hero for some and a top-tier villain for others. According to the US government, his revelations were a matter of national security. They slapped him with some pretty serious charges, pushing him to book a one-way ticket to Russia, where he's been chilling ever since to avoid persecution in the United States. It's a wild story, really. Makes you wonder about the fine line between keeping things under wraps for safety and just plain snooping around because they can. Number 3, Tiananmen Square, China. This open secret is kept not through secrecy, but through fear. It's a whole 1984 scene going on in China when it comes to the Tiananmen Square incident. In China, even a simple search about the Tiananmen Square massacre can lead to government interrogation or punishment. It's a whole new level of cover-up. On June 1989, Chinese forces attacked pro-democracy demonstrations headed by students and workers. Military soldiers cleared Tiananmen Square, killing hundreds, possibly thousands, of unarmed civilians. China still refuses to disclose the actual fatality numbers, sticking to its narrative of necessary actions against counter-revolutionary activities. The government heavily censors any information about the massacre and controls the internet with its Great Firewall, blocking access to sensitive or politically subversive content. This demonstrates their resolve to control the narrative and maintain political stability by silencing dissenting voices and burying historical truths. It is scary how a government in today's world can enforce something like this on its citizens. Number 4. Chernobyl Disaster. Very few people nowadays realize the amount of effort that went into covering up the Chernobyl disaster back in the day. On April 26, 1986, under the Soviet government, Reactor 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine exploded during a safety test. The results? A massive amount of radioactive material being released into the atmosphere. The Soviet government implemented a 30-kilometer exclusion zone around the plant, displacing thousands of residents. However, given Cold War tensions, political stability was crucial, pushing the government to downplay the disaster's severity. Thousands of casualties, including workers, nearby residents, and unwitting firefighters, suffered long-term health consequences due to radiation exposure. Despite the eventual revelation of the catastrophe's extent, the government persisted in its initial cover-up and ongoing efforts to control information. This underscores the Soviets' prioritization of political stability over public safety and transparency. To this day, Chernobyl remains largely abandoned, resembling a ghost town. Number 5. Iran-Contra affair. Who can forget about this classic cover-up? In the early 1980s, with the Cold War looming, the United States and Russia were playing political chess. President Reagan, riding the anti-communist wave, pledged to back rebel organizations globally, particularly the Contras in Nicaragua. But here's where things get murky. It turns out some of the Contras' cash came from the sketchy world of cocaine. Congress stepped in with the Boland Amendment, cutting off U.S. funding. Reagan, however, wasn't one to back down. So when Iran had American hostages in Lebanon, Reagan saw an opportunity. He greenlit a covert deal, weapons for hostages. Sneaky, right? But it didn't end there. The deal also included money. Iran paid $30 million for weapons, despite Reagan's public stance against negotiating with terrorists. So the hostage thing was just a cover-up, because $18 million of that cash found its way to the Contras. When the truth came out, it was chaos. Investigations, hearings, the whole 9 yards. Reagan managed to dodge the bullet himself, but his pals weren't so lucky. Yet, despite the drama, Reagan still left the White House with a thumbs up from the American public. Politics, eh? Number 6. JFK Murder. This is perhaps the most controversial cover-up ever. The 1963 assassination of President John F. Kennedy still remains engulfed in mystery, with evidence suggesting a cover-up. Despite the Warren Commission's finding that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, concerns remain due to hidden facts and anomalies in the investigation. The animation labs and other analyses provide compelling evidence to discredit the plausibility of the one-bullet theory as well. Many questions remain unexplained following Oswald's murder, and after just 2 days of his arrest, Oswald was shot while being taken from the police station to the county jail. This killing took place in front of television cameras, further stunning the nation. Was it an unforeseeable crime or an execution? No one is really sure. The Warren Commission's report, while extensive, was criticized for its narrow emphasis and failure to cover all aspects of the assassination. Following investigations, including those by Congress, attempted to fill in the gaps, yet yielded more questions than answers. To this day, a number of documents related to the case are being withheld, which in no way is helping dispel concerns and suspicions. Instead, this fuels conspiracy theories about the involvement of numerous government institutions and foreign forces. The prolonged mystery surrounding Kennedy's killing reflects an increasing lack of public trust in institutions and illustrates the lasting appeal of conspiracy ideas in American culture. Number 7. MK Ultra. If you think the JFK murder is wild, wait till you hear about this one. MK Ultra was this shady CIA project back in the Cold War days, intended to create mind control and interrogation techniques through the use of drugs, manipulative psychology, and who knows what else. It operated in secret, with minimal oversight and accountability, allowing for immoral experiments on unknowing subjects like citizens, prisoners, and military personnel. Slipping them LSDs without a clue was one major routine of this project, which messed up the people pretty badly. Investigations and congressional hearings in the 1970s uncovered the full scope of the program, sparking public outrage. Turns out they destroyed or hid documents left and right, demonstrating the extent to which the government tried to cover their tracks. Not the kind of behavior that sparks trust now, is it? The results prompted increased scrutiny of intelligence agencies and considerable condemnation of the CIA's practices. But the fallout didn't end there. Survivors of MK Ultra, many of them suffered long-term trauma. These poor souls who got caught up in their twisted experiments are still trying to get justice and recognition for their experiences. Though formal apologies and compensation can't be found, the legacy of MK Ultra is a grim reminder of what happens when those in power run amok. Just imagine if they declassified this. What would be the extent of things they didn't tell us? We're left in the dark about a lot of what went down, showing just how tough it is to unveil the secrets held by the big shots. Number 8. My Lai Massacre. On the 16th of March 1968, a horrible event occurred during the Vietnam War. In My Lai, American soldiers mercilessly killed hundreds of innocent Vietnamese villagers, including women, children, and the elderly. Why is this not public knowledge? At first, the U.S. military swept it under the rug, downplaying the suffering and misrepresenting it as a genuine military operation against Viet Cong troops. They neglected to probe deeply into the massacre and suppressed evidence of American soldiers' war crimes. It took a year for investigative journalists to find the truth and reveal the cover-up. The horrific discoveries sparked widespread outrage and disapproval, both domestically and internationally, undermining support for the Vietnam War and bringing anti-war sentiment. The My Lai Massacre shows a government's deceptive tactics in hiding horrors committed by its soldiers and burying evidence of wrongdoing. The following attempts to manipulate facts and dodge accountability point out the extent to which officials were willing to go to safeguard the military's image and sustain public morale in the middle of a controversial fight. Number 9. Operation Northwoods. When big shots in government mess up, things go wrong real fast. Operation Northwoods was a wild idea proposed by the U.S. Department of Defense in the 1960s during the era of the Cold War. They were planning some truly insane things like performing false terrorist acts on American soil, bombings, hijackings, you name it, and then blaming it all on Cuba. They even planned to sink American ships, attack military bases, and go as far as faking funerals to trick folks into supporting a war against Cuba. Unbelievable, right? President John F. Kennedy's team got wind of this scheme, but they shut it down fast. It was just too extreme and downright shady. Operation Northwoods did not happen, but it reveals how determined the U.S. government was to cause trouble in Cuba. When Operation Northwoods was declassified in the early 2000s, it raised some controversy. People were astounded to see how far the government will go to mislead public opinion and justify military action. It's a terrifying reminder of the lengths some would go in the pursuit of power and politics. The whole fiasco makes you wonder about the other wars the USA has been involved in since. Number 10. Trident missile failure. Not every cover-up is about hiding some crazy scandal. Sometimes it's just about saving face. Take the Trident missile goof-up on January 2017, for instance. The Royal Navy had a total facepalm moment when a routine test went off the rails. They were aiming for a target off Africa's west coast, but ended up sending the missile on a joyride to the US instead. After blowing a cool $17 million on this project, the British government had its fingers crossed, hoping nobody would notice the blunder. But surprise, surprise, the truth came out, and they couldn't sweep it under the rug anymore. Fast forward to February 2024, and guess what? Another Trident mishap. Despite officials swearing up and down about their confidence in Trident's gear, these repeat fiascos are raising some serious eyebrows. Is it another attempt at cover-up, or are they just sticking to their guns a bit too stubbornly? Either way, it's an embarrassing moment for both the UK and the US Trident missile maker. Number 11, Hillsborough Disaster. Even the world of sports is not immune to cover-ups. It was the FA Cup semi-final between Liverpool and Nottingham on the 15th April 1989. However, what should have been a day of celebration turned tragic because of a disastrous combination of overcrowding, mismanagement, and improper policing. Despite warning indications, including a little boy being plucked from the crowd, authorities did not take decisive action to relieve the overcrowding. To avoid overcrowding outside, they opened the exit gate and chaos ensued as thousands surged into the already packed central pens. During the game's early moments, the pen behind Liverpool goal fans climbed out, and authorities mistook the unfolding disaster for a pitch invasion. It wasn't until precious minutes had passed that the severity of the situation became apparent. By then, it was too late for 97 fans. In the aftermath, rather than accept responsibility, authorities sought to shift blame onto the fans. False narratives were constructed, painting Liverpool supporters as drunken hooligans responsible for the tragedy. This cover-up extended to the court process, with initial investigations clearing the police of any wrongdoing. Despite decades of campaigning by the victims' loved ones, justice eluded them for many years. The Hillsborough disaster serves as an upsetting example of the consequences of institutional failure, as the government apologized to families and admitted to covering up the incident after 34 years. Number 12. FSB bombing Moscow. For this one, folks, we're diving into one of the murkiest cover-ups of modern times. The 1999 bombing of a building in Moscow. The Russian government pointed fingers at Chechen separatists, using the bombing as a ticket to kick off the Second Chechen War. But hold your horses, the available evidence has been whispering some shady secrets. Was this bombing a setup? Some folks say it smells fishy, like a classic false flag operation, or maybe, just maybe, the government knew more than they're letting on. Why? Well, stirring up fear and rallying the troops for a war sure does have its perks. Some sleuthing journalists and human rights crusaders have been turning up the heat, raising eyebrows and asking all the right questions. But guess what? The government's unhinged, sticking to their story like glue. They're not budging an inch, even with all the finger-pointing. But hey, until we get some concrete answers, it's all just speculation. Meanwhile, the blame game continues, with Chechen terrorists taking the fall while the truth lurks in the shadows. Number 13. Exxon Valdez oil spill. Pollution and its cover-up are not new to us, but let's address one of the most serious environmental disasters caused by humans. Exxon Valdez oil spill. Back in March 1989, Exxon's largest oil tanker spilt 11 million gallons of crude oil into the ocean near Bligh Reef in Alaska. Instead of accepting responsibility for the disaster, Exxon executives attempted to cover it up. Their CEO, Lawrence Rawle, went so far as to claim that there was no spill. Talk about denial. Their unwillingness to face reality resulted in an excruciatingly slow cleanup process. They cut corners with resources, resulting in oil soaking into a larger area. Wildlife suffered greatly, fisheries were destroyed, and coastal communities were left reeling in the aftermath. Sometimes, When large corporations try to avoid responsibility, Mother Nature suffers the consequences. Despite their cleanup attempts, the scars of the Exxon Valdez disaster are still visible today, acting as a warning against environmental carelessness. Number 14. Operation Paperclip. After World War II, the US government had this wild idea. Why not recruit Nazi scientists, engineers, and technicians? Now you may ask why they would do that. Well, to boost their game in the Cold War against the Soviets, of course. These German brainiacs were supposed to give them an edge, especially in rocketry, aerospace stuff, and making bigger and stronger weapons. But hold up, this whole operation was shady as heck. The government kept it all hush-hush, never telling us what they were really up to. The recruits were not ordinary Germans. They were high-ranking individuals associated with the Nazi regime. To avoid scrutiny, controversy, and public backlash, the US government obscured the true backgrounds of these scientists. They downplayed or falsified information about the Germans' past affiliations and activities to maintain support for the program. The stated backgrounds of the Germans were often fabricated or misrepresented to the public, concealing their Nazi ties and potential involvement in war crimes. They wanted to dodge the drama and keep everyone on board with the Operation Paperclip, especially during those tense Cold War times. Now keep in mind, these were scientists who had done very horrible stuff during their time in power in Nazi Germany. And since they were now helping the USA, they basically got away from their crimes scot-free. Yeah, I would rather have less scientific progress if it means those monsters get punished for their crimes. Number 15. Tuskegee Syphilis Study. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study is a disturbing monument to the extent of unethical medical practices. From 1932 to 1972, the United States Public Health Service ran this study, fooling hundreds of poor African-American males in Tuskegee, Alabama. These individuals were promised free medical care, but instead were subjected to a horrible experiment in which they were purposely left untreated for syphilis. The deception ran deep. Men were not told they had syphilis, but were led to assume they were being treated for bad blood. Even after penicillin was discovered to be an effective therapy, they were denied access and their misery was extended for the sake of research. What's even more shocking is the cover-up. Despite growing concerns and calls for its termination, the study continued for 4 decades. The exact nature of the experiment was hidden. The true nature of the Tuskegee Syphilis Study uncovered not only medical malpractice, but also institutional racism and the exploitation of communities of color. It triggered critical changes in research ethics, highlighting the significance of informed consent and the preservation of human rights in scientific experiments. But for the victims, the damage is already done. Number 16. Watergate Scandal. Folks, this one is wild because when the lid blew off this scandal, it had some serious and immediate consequences. Enter the Watergate Scandal. It all began with a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in the Watergate complex in Washington. 5 people were arrested, but the situation quickly became weird. Some folks tied to the president were caught red-handed, obstructing the investigation. They pulled all sorts of tricks to stonewall the FBI's probe into the break-in. They even tried to cover up the involvement of top administration brass. And then, boom! Secretly recorded tapes of President Nixon's conversations at the Oval Office emerged. These recordings made some shocking revelations. They clearly showed ties between the arrested individuals and Nixon's re-election campaign. Cue the congressional hearings and media circus. Nixon found himself in a precarious position, with rising pressure and devastating proof. With no other options, he did something uncommon. He resigned from the office, becoming the first and only president in U.S. history to do so. Number 17. SARS Outbreak. It's puzzling why governments would sweep medical issues under the rug, right? Well, let me break it down. Take the SARS outbreak in China, not the recent COVID-19 saga, but the one back in 2003. Within a month, frontline workers made up a staggering 25% of those affected. Instead of being upfront, the government kept insisting that everything was fine, nothing to fret about. Meanwhile, doctors and journalists brave enough to sound the alarm were either muzzled or faced repercussions. This cover-up didn't just put a lid on things, it delayed the international response, which gave SARS enough time to spread far and wide. Fast forward to 2019, and it's like déjà vu. Once again, the government was playing the same tune, this time in Wuhan, China. But we all know how that story unfolded. Seriously, if you know an outbreak is beginning, what is even the point of trying to cover it up when it is going to spread anyway? I will never understand. Number 18. The Gulf of Tonkin. Earlier in the video, I presented the tragic events of the Lai Massacre. 4 years earlier, 2 attacks on U.S. warships prompted President Lyndon B. Johnson to request and receive congressional permission for the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Now you might be wondering, what does this have to do with the Lai Massacre? Well, this resolution laid the groundwork for everything that unfolded in Vietnam thereafter. It authorized military action in Southeast Asia without a formal declaration of war and served as the legal foundation for the United States' increased involvement in the Vietnam War. However, everything isn't that simple. Remember those alleged attacks on the warships? It turns out one of them never actually occurred. Speculations and allegations arose at the time, but it wasn't until 2005 when previously classified NSA documents confirmed the doubts about the second attack. The documents revealed that the warship was on routine patrol and wasn't under attack on the reported date. This revelation marked a critical moment in the escalation of U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War, driven by flawed or exaggerated information. In short, the USA's escalation to the Vietnam War was in part based on false information. Now, whether that misinformation was purposefully placed or not, you decide. And that concludes the list of the most shocking government cover-ups to date. But who's to say there aren't more hidden realities beneath the surface? After all, the best cover-ups are those that never make it into the public eye, right? Do you have any theories about what the government might be hiding from us? Drop them in the comments below and let's spark some conversation. And hey, if you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on more intriguing content like this. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious.